So Lisa, we are about a minute in, so let's jump in for the people that were in and on time.
We'll say all the good stuff right now, so if anybody's late, they don't get it. Um, all right, so my name is Lisa Thompson. I am an attorney here in Arizona. I have been practicing business law for the last 28 years. I am also licensed in California and Nevada. And I'm excited to talk to you today about the Corporate Transparency Act, not because, it's exciting, but I am really passionate about folks not getting caught because they don't know the law. So, um, there we go. If you need to reach out to me, you can contact me at cta@thompsonlawgroup.com. And I do keep my frequently asked questions about the Corporate Transparency Act up to date. So you can always go there. Or if you have someone that needs to know more about it, have them go to my website and check out the frequently asked questions. So my goal today is for everyone to have a basic understanding of the CTA, to update folks on the recent changes to the CTA. So if you were one of those early birds that got this done already, some of the changes may affect you. And also just to give you the tools to spread the word so other business owners know about this, because it's called the Corporate Transparency Act. And so I think a lot of folks that have LLCs don't think it applies to them. And in fact, it does. And it's kind of specifically targeted at them. Um, you will get a copy of this presentation. I'm not sure how, you guys can post it in the chat if you want. If not, you can reach out to me or you can reach out to the host and they'll send you a copy of this entire PowerPoint presentation so you have it. So here's my disclaimers. The seminar is for informational purposes only. It is not specific legal advice, and there is no substitute for consulting with a qualified business law attorney on your specific circumstances. So if you have an LLC and you've never talked to a business law attorney, doesn't have to be me, but you should talk to someone and make sure that you are doing everything as it should be. All right, so I've included these definitions in the PowerPoint in case you're looking at it and I'm not here to um, give you the definitions or to explain what they are as I do throughout this presentation. I do want to point out that FinCEN is a bureau of the U.S. Department of Treasury, and it's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. And the website is fincen.gov. Um, so I think it's important to know that this is where, it's a bureau with the Department of Treasury, much like the Internal Revenue Service is. All right, so here's some housekeeping. Um, put your questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer any question that comes up. I have given the powers that be interruption power. So if I am not making sense, they will interrupt me so that we don't get lost. Or you're not lost because I didn't say something clearly. I will mostly be referencing LLCs or using the word company as it's just easier. And it's most prevalent with the real estate community in particular. The Corporate Transparency Act applies to both foreign and domestic business entities. So if you do know a a business from Mexico or the European Union, it applies to everyone. So I think this is just going to be another cost of doing business, just like the other things that we have to do to maintain a company, like keeping your EIN or your TIN updated, obtaining your business license, maintaining your business records with public entities. The only difference here is there are severe penalties for failure to comply. So I think this is just something that we've just got to learn about, and it's just part of the things that we do, and we keep these records accurate. So the goal of the Corporate Transparency Act was to create a non-public database for law enforcement personnel and some financial institutions to track human ownership of businesses that are typically unregulated by the government. And it's designed to thwart money laundering and the funding of terrorist activities. And so they're really looking for, when multiple LLCs have been formed and then shut down immediately, that indicates, in some instances, money laundering activities. And so they're really looking at who is behind the, you know, the Wizard of Oz, like who's behind the curtain, and they want to know the humans. So when you are doing any kind of reporting for the Corporate Transparency Act, you are reporting the human individuals that are involved in it. And I've been searching for a little movie clip to put in here, or something from a TV show, so that you could kind of see what I'm talking about. But the best I've come up with is episode 1, season 1 of Jack Ryan, where he knows that there's a bunch of money going to and from some entities, but he does not know who the people are behind it. And they're trying to find out, who it is, so that they could possibly stop some bad activities from occurring. So this is kind of what this is designed to do. It is not, if you have confidential ownership, it will remain confidential as to the world. As to me, if I'm doing due diligence for a buy sell, I will not be able to get that information. All of this information that you're going to provide is what the government gave you anyway, and they could go get it from various organizations like, the Motor Vehicle Division, or, Passport Control, or the IRS to get your EIN, but they're trying to put it in one location so it's easy for law enforcement officials. So here's the history of it. This began back in 2018. Other countries have had the equivalent for years. But in 2018, the global financial community really kind of criticized the United States for the lack of transparency in corporate ownership. And corporate ownership, again, I mean LLCs as part of that, and also partnerships, limited partnerships. So on January 1st, 2021, the corporate transparency passed by a 2/3 vote of Congress. So you don't get to be mad at the Republicans, and you don't get to be mad at the Democrats, because they all put this into effect. And, no one really talked about it. One, because it didn't go into effect, like you couldn't do anything with it until January of this year. And so, you know, I, I'm just trying to get through, today. So I'm not thinking about what's happening 3 years from now or 2 years from now. So it largely was ignored. But also the Capitol riot occurred on January 6th, so that eclipsed any discussion of this. And you're really not seeing anything about it right now in the press, which is interesting to me, and I think will change towards the end of the year. Um, so I put in that New York has passed its own LLC Transparency Act, and Maryland, and some of the other states are also moving towards having transparency and ownership. So I don't think that this is going to go away anytime soon. So after it went into effect the 1st of January of this year, the fines were increased from $500 a day to $591 a day. It was increased just like other federal civil fines, due to inflation. So they can increase annually. And these have been widely reported as there's a cap on them. There is not a cap on these civil fines. It's $591 a day until the violation has been cured. On March 1st of this year, an Alabama district court said that the CTA was unconstitutional. There is no stay as to enforcement, except for the plaintiffs in this lawsuit that were members of the Small Business United group. out of Washington, D.C. At the time the lawsuit was brought. And then in September of this year, an Oregon federal court declared the CTA was constitutional. So, there is a split in the circuits. Um, the Alabama case is up on appeal. The oral arguments have been heard, but we are not going to hear anything before the end of the year, which is when the deadline is. FinCEN provides additional guidance, and we'll email that to you if you work in this area and you're interested. They had major changes in July and October, which I will be speaking about. Of the estimated 33 million companies that are affected by the CTA, only about 3 million have filed beneficial ownership information reports. And as of last week, only 100,000 of the 1.4 million businesses in Arizona have complied with the CTA. And that was per the director of the corporation division of the Arizona Corporation Commission. So, what does this mean as a practical matter for businesses? So, what it means is any business entity that was formed or registered in the United States is considered a reporting company and must report its human beneficial ownership information to FinCEN. And so, you know, sole proprietors are not a business that's formed, because you can be a sole proprietor by sitting on your couch and just deciding you're going to go sell cookies at the state fair. Registered means a foreign business that has come into the United States and registered to do business in one of our states. And it also applies to those foreign businesses that should have registered. A lot of foreign businesses do not register because there's no penalties to not registering. So in the state of Arizona, if you're a foreign business and you don't register, nothing happens to you. If you get sued and you haven't registered your business, you just need to go register it, and there's no penalties. So they included the language "or should be registered." So there's two questions you ask yourself when you're determining what your business needs to do to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act. It's one, is the business entity a reporting company? And two, is the reporting company exempt? So those are your two questions. So is the business a reporting company? 99.9% yes. If you filed documents with a corporation commission or a secretary of state to be formed, it is a reporting company. So, like I said, sole proprietors are not. General partnerships are not, because you don't have to go and file any paperwork in order to create the business. So what our reporting companies are all limited liability companies, corporations, limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships, limited partnerships, and professional corporations and professional limited liability companies. And again, foreign businesses are part of this as well. So then the next question is your reporting company exempt? And so there are 23 exemption types that FinCEN has put out. And you'll note on these that most of them are highly regulated businesses. In order to be a bank, the government gets to know who the ownership is, the human owners are of the bank. They're already providing that information. Insurance companies, same thing. It's, state licensed insurance producers, anybody that's, dealing with securities. So those are the exemptions that you're seeing for most businesses. But I've highlighted the three that really affect us. The smaller business entities or the medium-sized ones. So the first one that may be an exemption for your company, depending on how large you are, is the large operating company. And that is where you have an entity that has 20 full-time employees, not hybrid, not, a combo, full-time W-2 employees, not independent contractors, 20 full-time W-2 employees, you have a physical location in the United States, and you have filed a US tax return indicating that you had over $5 million in gross receipts and income. So it hinges on, did you file a tax return that had, reported more than 5 million in gross receipts and income, and the 20 full-time employees, and also the physical location in the United States. There's a couple other quirks to that, but that's like the general rule. So if your business met those requirements, then it would be a large operating company and it would not have to file a beneficial ownership information report with FinCEN. The other one that people ask a lot about is a tax exempt entity, and that's your charitable organization. So any charitable organization that has tax exempt status from the IRS under 501c. So that includes your 501c3, your 501c4, your 501c6. That would be a an entity that was exempt from filing a beneficial ownership information report. This does not mean that all homeowners associations are exempt. FinCEN has specifically talked about homeowner associations and has provided guidance on those. And if you're interested in that, if you'll shoot me an email after the presentation, I'll send you the two pieces of information that FinCEN has provided on HOAs, because they're not all necessarily tax exempt or tax exempt under 501c4, which is typically where they would be. If they're exempt under another section of the code, they are not exempt from reporting to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act. And then the other exemption that I get asked a lot about, and we are going to talk about in detail a little bit further on in the presentation, is the inactive entity exemption. So if you do have an inactive entity and it meets these 6 requirements to be an inactive entity, then you might not have to report. Keep in mind, if any of the things that allow you to be an exempt or be exempt from reporting with the Corporate Transparency Act change, you have 30 calendar days in which to file the report with FinCEN, or you're out of compliance. So any new company that's formed as of now is not going to be exempt, because it's not possible to have your tax exempt letter for your corporation to make it a charity until such time as you have filed it. You're also not going to be able to be a large operating company until you have filed a tax return that shows 5 million in gross receipts. So I think that most companies that are new, I haven't thought of an example where it's going to be a new company that can immediately say that it's exempt, are going to have to report. And then once they are exempt, they can go back in and change their report to indicate that they are now exempt from reporting. So the business is a reporting company and it's not exempt. What do you need to do? So you must electronically, the business itself must electronically file a beneficial ownership information report with FinCEN and keep it updated if anything changes at all in the reporting. So a beneficial ownership information report contains, so for the reporting company, you're going to report the name and any trade names, the address. You may not use a PO box. You can use your home address. So many businesses are virtual that I think a lot of folks are using their business address. I think that also if you have rental property, I go back and forth on which address I list for rental property. Typically, I'm listing the owner's home address, because the rental property itself is not where the business is being done, but I don't see a problem either way with that. Then you're also going to report the employer identification number or taxpayer identification number for the business. And if the business does not have an EIN or a TIN, then you report the owner's social security number, which is a change that happened back in July. And then for each beneficial owner of the company, you need to report the full legal name, residential address of that owner, date of birth, and provide a copy of the unexpired driver's license or passport. So all of this is information that the government has in various locations. You're just providing it in one place so that they can have a database for easy access. So beneficial owners are humans that have 25% actual ownership of the company, or they exercise substantial control of the company. So in LLCs, you're going to be reporting your managers. In corporations, you're going to be reporting your board of directors, your officers, your president, your vice president, your CEO, your CFO. The decision makers is essentially what you're reporting. And that can change. And some decision makers don't have titles, others do. I don't know that always you have to report every single member of the board of directors. It just depends entirely on what the bylaws say and what kind of decision-making authority that the folks have. So the CTA is not one size fits all. It varies by state. So for example, federal bankruptcy law, the federal law governs every single state. But filing a bankruptcy in Arizona is really different than filing a bankruptcy in, say, Illinois, because you look to state statutes to interpret various things. So yes, there's a federal law, but it is different by state. So this is the way the CTA is. So you have to comply with the laws of your state, which are different by state. So for example, I told you sole proprietors and general partnerships in the state of Arizona are not reporting companies. That is not a true statement for Delaware. Delaware does require general partnerships to report, or to create a general partnership, you must file with the Delaware Secretary of State. So it is a reporting company in Delaware. So you've got to look at what your state law is saying about business entities where you live. So FinCEN, just the beginning of February, said that married business owners in community property states must look at whether or not the spouse needs to report. And so that is something that is very specific to 9 different states, Arizona being one of them, Nevada, California, Washington, Idaho, Texas, New Mexico, and Wisconsin. Maybe it's 11. I don't remember, but it affects us here in Arizona. So you need to determine if you are married, whether or not your spouse has ownership in the company. And so I get a lot from people where they're like, well, I'm a professional lawyer, or I'm a professional broker, or I am a doctor and I am a PC and my spouse couldn't own any of it. And I think that there's that, but you got to think about if you got divorced, would your spouse think that your spouse could get some kind of ownership or some kind of money for their, contributions to your business? And if the answer is yes, I think that your spouse needs to be reported. Um, so I always kind of look at if folks are married, that they should report their spouses if they actually have a membership interest, an ownership interest, or shares of stock in a business. The only time I would change from that is if the spouse specifically disclaimed an interest in the business. So you guys are in the real estate industry. You know how if a married couple is buying a piece of property and only one person is going to sign off on it, the title company is gonna require a disclaimer. So if you've got a disclaimer like that from the spouse saying, I have no ownership interest in this company, then I think you're safe not reporting your spouse. But otherwise, I take the position that you do need to. So a note on trust. I think that if you have a trust, I think that having a trust own your LLC or your business corporation is an excellent succession plan. It's a really good way to deal with, issues if you're either permanently or temporarily disabled. So trusts in the state of Arizona are not reporting companies. So if you have a living revocable trust and it's you and your spouse and it owns your LLC, then you are going to report you and your spouse. And that is what you would put on your beneficial ownership information report as the beneficial owners. Um, because again, you're reporting humans. Irrevocable trusts are a different beast. It requires a little bit of analysis to determine who would be the beneficial owners. And a lot of that just hinges on, who has control, who can do things with the trust. And it just needs to be looked at. So there's no, hard and fast rule. So what are the deadlines? So I think it's really important to note, and for my um, lawyer colleagues, we've been taught, and also for you guys, we've always been taught it's business days. FinCEN and the Corporate Transparency Act do not use business days, they use calendar days. So, which is why I've capitalized it. So you could potentially have something that's due on a weekend or a holiday. But any existing reporting company that existed prior to January 1, 2024 needs to file its initial beneficial ownership information report by December 31st of this year. Do it now. I am anticipating that the FinCEN platform is going to crash. So I would get these done as soon as possible. Any reporting company that was formed or registered after January 1, 2024 needs to have filed its beneficial ownership information report within 90 calendar days of its formation. And it must include company applicant information, and I will explain to you what that is in a minute. Any reporting company formed or registered after January 1, 2025 is only going to have 30 calendar days to file their beneficial ownership information report. And any corrections or updates that need to be made to a report need to be made within 30 days or 30 calendar days of discovering that there was an error. This is also if there's any kind of change. So if you update your driver's license, you need to update your beneficial ownership information report. So what happens if the beneficial ownership information report is not filed by the deadline? It's $591 a day in civil fines for each day that the violation continues until it is fixed. These are against the beneficial owners personally. So you need to take this seriously. You do not want to hand it off to anyone, or you want to make sure that whoever you hand it off to is trained, because this is a big deal. This could be devastating. So you can also have criminal penalties of up to $10,000, which is where I think the disconnect came with, like, oh, there's a cap. Because even the Journal of Accountancy put out there that, it's, $500 a day and there's a cap of $10,000. That's not true. There's two different sets of penalties. One is civil and one is criminal. And I kind of think that having a cap on the criminal penalties of $10,000, like, when you're in the place that FinCEN is so mad at you that they're looking at putting you in prison for up to 2 years, I don't know that the $10,000 cap on the criminal fine is that big a deal, because you've likely got a lot of civil fines, but that's what the law says. I want to make a note too that law enforcement personnel and anybody, financial institutions who are going to get access to this information as well, are subject to the same fines if they do not follow the strict protocols for disclosure. So they can be fined personally $591 a day. Their fines for criminal is like 25,000, and I believe it's not more than 5 years in prison. And so there are hefty penalties that go both ways. Um, and I think that there have to be penalties because, as I was mentioning earlier, foreign businesses do not register in the state of Arizona, whether they're supposed to or not. They may not know to do it, but they don't do it. And what happens to them? Nothing. And so I think that they impose these fines not to harm small business, but to have people take this seriously so that they can get some useful tools in possibly thwarting terrorist activities or money laundering. Um, so I think that that's why they are there. So what changed in July is, um, so if you got advice prior to July about a dissolved entity, that that advice may not be accurate as of today. So any company that was not permanently, formally, and irrevocably dissolved on January 1st, 2024 are still subject to the Corporate Transparency Act unless they are otherwise exempt. So what this means is if you have a business and it existed this year, and you heard one of my earlier presentations where I said, well, just dissolve it and you're good, because if it doesn't exist on December 31st, then you don't have to report. Vincent came out in July and said exactly the opposite of that. And so, in fact, if you do dissolve a business, or terminate a business during 2024, if it is not exempt, you do have to file a report for it, a beneficial ownership information report. And the other thing that changed was a lot of companies, or LLCs in particular, that hold rental property are treated as disregarded entities for taxation purposes. And so they do not have EINs. And so Fenson came out and said that you do not have to get an EIN solely for the purpose of filing a beneficial ownership information report. So this is the inactive entity that I've been talking about. So if you had a business that was in existence prior to January 1, 2020, which is, I think, where most people fall down, because there were a lot of businesses that were created during the pandemic when we all decided that our hobbies would make us great amounts of money, and formed LLCs. So if the business was in existence prior to January 1, 2020, and I don't know why that's the date. If the business is not currently engaged in business, it has no foreign ownership, it had no change in ownership in the last 12 months, it has not received any funds in an amount greater than $1,000 in the last 12 months, and it does not hold any assets. If all of those things are present in your situation, you have an inactive entity, and you do not need to report to FinCEN. You do not need to file a beneficial ownership information report. And if you want to terminate your LLC, and these things are present, you don't have to do anything. You can go ahead and terminate it. That's great. You're done. If you keep it and you start using it, you have 30 days in which to file your beneficial ownership information report. So the good news is, if you have a business that you're going to dissolve this year, you only have to report the one time. You don't have to maintain your beneficial ownership information report because you're going to terminate your business. So new companies have to report what's called a company applicant, and this is only for businesses that are created now or anything that was created after January 1 of 2024. So essentially, it's who directed you to file the LLC? Like, who said, hey, you know what, you should be an LLC, or you should form a corporation, or you should do this as kind of a tax strategy, or to protect yourself from personal liability. Whoever gave you that information is supposed to be listed on your beneficial ownership information report as a company applicant. And then whoever actually files your business entity that person also is a company applicant. So, if you use LegalZoom is having to have its person report on your beneficial ownership information report because they are actively filing your LLC or other business entity. So, um, I have a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, what about before January 1, 2024? No, it's only new businesses starting as of January 1, 2024. If you form your business entity yourself, you are the company applicant. And statutory or registered agents do not report to FinCEN unless they own the business or have substantial control of it. So if you happen to be a statutory agent and have no other interest in the business, you are not subject to any kind of beneficial ownership information report requirements. And also company applicants you don't have to maintain their information. You only report them once and then you never worry about them again. If you have a bunch of LLCs and you want to avoid inputting your information multiple times, and I do this with a lot of my clients that I'm forming businesses for, or I'm filing their beneficial ownership information report, is we get what's called a FinCEN identifier. And because I form entities, I have to report my own, as a company applicant, I have to provide the same information as a beneficial owner. And not that I don't love my clients, but they don't necessarily need to know my birth date and, a copy of my driver's license and all of that good stuff. So I have a FinCEN identifier. And so whenever I have to put in my information, I just put in my code and it will automatically put in my information for that report. So if you have multiple rental properties that are all held in in different LLCs, you may be asked to get a FinCEN identifier, or you may want to. And then if something changes for you, like you renew your driver's license or your passport, or you move, then all you have to do is change your FinCEN identifier and it automatically populates into all of the businesses where you have any kind of ownership. So how does a business file a beneficial ownership information report? Has to be filed electronically. You file it on fincen.gov. There's no way to file it. You can't be like, well, I want to send it by mail. You cannot do that. It is electronic. There's no filing fee. It's not annual. You only have to meet this deadline. And then after you meet this deadline, you only have to file again when something changes. So you want to, I think this is where people are going to get burned because we don't think about, reporting to FinCEN. Like we're thinking about it now, but in 2 years from now, what happens if you have to renew your passport? So you may want to put a little, thank God for electronic calendars, put in a little tickler for yourself. You can get a third-party filing service to do your report. I think that you want to be really careful about that. I do not know of any third-party filing service that is in fact asking the questions about community property, which certainly affect you. They're going to take no responsibility for the report being wrong. They are not providing you legal advice. They give you a questionnaire and they say that they're going to file based on that, but I don't know of any of them, and I troll them on a regular basis that are asking about community property, and I think that's a huge failing. So if you do it yourself, that's fine. The act of filing it is not particularly hard. It's what goes in it. So I don't think that I need to file your beneficial ownership information report. I'm happy to do that if you want me to, but I don't need to be a BOIR factory. I am interested in making sure that your report is accurate. So you really do want to talk to a qualified business attorney or business law attorney that works in this area and make sure that you are doing what you need to do to make sure that your report is accurate. Because if it's not, a week of fees is like $4,000. And, you do not want to be the person that Fenton makes an example of. So, when would you have to change your report? So, when any beneficial owner changes his or her residential address, renews driver's license or passport, you have a beneficial owner that ceases to be a beneficial owner. They either die, they leave, they're bought out, they get married, they get divorced. All of those things you need to look at. You bring in anybody else that's a beneficial owner. So let's say you change your board of directors, you change your managers, you change the ownership of the company. And the other time you have to make changes to your beneficial ownership information report is if you become exempt, you go in and you say this company is now exempt, or if you lose the exemption. So as I said, there's no annual reporting requirements, but you do have to be cognizant of making changes when you have to. So if you are going to do it yourself, make sure you use your legal names. Make sure you get your business names right. I have one client who fights with me about what her business name is, and I'm like, this is what it says on the document. See right here. I don't care what you call it. That's not what we're talking about. What does it say on the documents? You want to make sure that all of your business information matches. I am anticipating that there is going to be some cross-referencing of documents as time goes by, and you need to make sure that everything is up to date and accurate. You do, by law, have a duty to do that in the state of Arizona, but again, we have no penalties if you do not. If you've already filed your beneficial ownership information report and you think that the new guidance might affect you, you should have it looked at. And if you are in doubt as to whether or not you should report someone, you should report them. I do not want to get any love notes from Fenton saying, hey, why didn't you report your husband? I would rather just report his information because, again, it's not, he's reporting on his own LLCs. And also, this is information the government already has. So, as I mentioned, I think that I question whether or not Fenton's platform is going to be able to handle the volume because it's going to be close to, 25,000 beneficial ownership information reports that need to be filed per day for everyone to comply by the end of the year. So what my firm is doing is we are taking the whole company and making sure that all of the pieces are put together, like that your statutory agent is who it should be. And you're not paying more fees for that than you should be. I just had someone tell me that LegalZoom charged them like $750. That's crazy. And we also look and see that all of your records are accurate and make recommendations as to things that you may or may not know to do or that you should consider. I do want to make a note on single member LLCs since I have a bunch of single member LLCs. I think that you should really consider making sure and using this as an opportunity to talk to a business law attorney and discuss whether or not you should be member managed or you should be manager managed. I think a lot of folks that have their CPA has formed member managed companies. And sometimes, and those, depending on the operating agreement that you have in place, may not fully protect you from personal liability. So I think that it's important to look at things and make sure your LLC is as you think it should be. So, I further think that this is true because financial institutions will be able to access this beneficial ownership information platform in the spring of 2025 as part of their customer due diligence. So I think this is where we're going to see a lot of fines coming, which is just my opinion. And this is coming, and I put it in here for you. because you're real estate folks. Fenton is going to require reporting as of December 1st, 2025 of certain cash residential real estate deals, and they are going to have to report their beneficial ownership information to Fenton. So right now, and my understanding is we do not have geographic transfer orders in Arizona, so it's why this may sound crazy to you, but apparently in like Maryland and Nevada, there are these geographic transfer orders, GTOs, that require if there is a cash transaction over a certain amount, so like in Maryland, it's 250,000, and within a specific geographical location, then that information has to be reported to FinCEN. That's in effect now. What's going to happen December 1st, 2025 is there's no longer going to be GTOs. This is going to be national, and the different transfers, the what are they called? The non-finance transfers that meet the requirements that I have below are going to be required to report to FinCEN. If you need to contact me, this is my information again. You are welcome to reach out to me. I did use my real legal name. I did not use Lisa C. Thompson. I used Lisa Carroll because that is what is on my driver's license and my passport. Does anybody have any questions? Anyone? I'm
No
not seeing
questions in the
anything in
chat.
the.
So far, so good. We got a bunch of quiet people
So I
today.
was 100% clear on everything.
Oh, it looks like Lisa may have a question.
Hopefully she'll throw me a softball.
Can I just unmute myself and ask?
Yeah, go for it.
Yep,
All right,
you're good
so
to go.
at the beginning, you mentioned something about foreign corporations and businesses from Mexico would have to file. You mean if a business in Mexico has an Arizona entity?
So if you have a foreign, so let's just use Mexico as our example. There's a Mexican corporation that is here in Arizona doing business. Technically, they're supposed to register with the Arizona Secretary of State as a foreign business doing business in Arizona. And they would be subject to reporting to FinCEN.
Okay, let me give you an example of that I'm thinking of. So I know someone who has a dental practice in Nogales and they promote it in Arizona. Right,
But are they on the Sonoran side?
I'm on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce for Green Valley and Sahuarita, and we have some of these Mexican businesses are members of our Chamber of Commerce, and they promote, come to Mexico for your dental services, it's a lot cheaper. And from Southern Arizona, it is no big deal to go to Nogales, right?
Right.
So those people would need to register.
But are they really doing business in Arizona? Are they on the Sonoran side?
They're just doing promotion in Arizona.
Yeah,
So
I don't think they would have to report
okay.
because they're not actively performing, so I think in that circumstance, they would not need to report.
I hear you. Okay.
Yeah. But see, it's like you look at the Corporate Transparency Act and you hear it and you're like, oh, that's easy. And then there's always like this scenario and you have to really think it through. Like that one. I mean, they're just promoting. So, we don't need to, they don't need to report. But if they came and they got, they maintained their Mexican corporation and they decided to get a location in, Green Valley, then yeah, they would have to report. So there is a question in the chat. So if your business has not been active for 2 years and no income, when was the business started? Was it started prior to January 1, 2020?
And Lynette, feel free to come off mute, my dear.
Yeah, exactly. You guys don't have to
Sure.
put them in chat. Lynette, do you know when your business was created?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I couldn't find it. I'm on my phone just kind of listening along. I think it was 2021.
Okay, then you're gonna have to report.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. But you only have to do it once. And my advice is if people have LLCs that they're really not using or they're inactive entities, I would just shut them down. I would do the report and shut them down. And then if you ever needed one again, then just start afresh.
So I have one more question. So I had an LLC up in Washington State for my real estate business. Clearly, I haven't been active up there for several years, and that Washington requires that you renew your LLC. So it hasn't been renewed. So now it's showing inactive. So that's not something I would need to report if Washington has dissolved it at this point.
If it's dissolved, for sure, like permanently, irrevocably dissolved.
Yeah, I don't think I did that.
So
I think I just never renewed it. So
well, does it meet the exemption requirements for an active entity?
possibly I took a screenshot of it. So I'll have to.
Yeah, we're going to be sending around this PowerPoint. So look at it and walk through it. If it meets
Okay.
that, then it doesn't need to report.
Okay.
But where people get caught up on the inactive entity is, it was created in 2021.
Yeah.
So, but you're only going to report once and then you're done.
We do have another question in the chat. Audrey, if you want to come off mute.
Okay, so thank you for asking about this, Audrey. I'm going to go on a tangent for a second. Fenton is not notifying you, period. If you get a text, an email, a phone call, anything like that, and it's, saying that it's Fenton, it is a scam. Fenton is doing a lot of public forums and trying to get the word out, but they're really relying heavily on the legal community as well as accountants to mention that their clients need to seek legal advice about this. So there's not going to be any kind of notice. I mean, just like we all have to file our taxes, we don't get a notice from the IRS because the IRS also doesn't call us, text us, or email us. And you also asked if you changed the name. Oh, and Lisa Larkin mentioned a while back, and I thought this was a great idea. You guys could use it as a way to reconnect with your clients. Like, hey, did you know? Because it shows that you're thinking about them. Wasn't that your idea, Lisa, when we talked before? Oh, you're still on mute.
Yes, and I just wrote that in the chat right before you said it.
Oh, okay, great. See, I was mimicking you. And let me make sure I got that, and then we'll go to James. So you're not going to get a formal notice. You need to just tell your friends and family, get your own advice. And if you change the name of your PLLC, do you have to do it for the old one? No, it's whatever your name is right now. Now, if later on you go and you change the name of your entity after you've already filed your report, then yes, you would have to amend your report to make the change. And actually, that's a really good question. I don't know how one would do that. Well, you would have to do something and we would have to figure it out. But for your old one, you do not need to. If it's just you change the name and now you're operating under a different name and you haven't filed your report yet, then you're fine. James, want to unmute?
Hi, yes, thanks. So I've got an LLC that owns rental properties. There's two members. One is my trust and the other is a different LLC, which I'm not a member of that LLC. There's several members, in that LLC. So for my portion of that LLC that owns the rental properties, I'll obviously report the beneficial interest, from my end, but I've sent a message to, the entity, the other LLC that's a member, that they need to do it. But what happens if they don't? I'm curious about the fine piece of this. If I'm a member of an LLC, I reported mine, but the other member of the LLC hasn't reported theirs. How does the fine piece of that work? I'm assuming I'm still liable because it's the LLC that's not in compliance, not just my membership.
So here's the thing. So you bring up a lot of interesting points. One, so it is the LLC's responsibility. So it is the one that does the report. So you can't piecemeal it. You have to, like, it's not like you can go in and do your portion and then the, the other owners put in their information. So you really have to have it all put together. The LLC that owns, so we're going to call it LLC 1 is owned by your trust. So your trust is going to be you. And if you're married, your spouse, likely. And then the other LLC, we're going to call it LLC 2, owns LLC 1. You've got to look at who the owners are for that LLC, and you're going to report them, because LLCs cannot be reported on the beneficial ownership information report as a beneficial owner because they're not humans. So you got to drill all the way down. And in your circumstance, using a third party company, like what we do, a lot of times beneficial owners don't want to share their information, just like I didn't want to give my driver's license to other folks as well. So like if you use our service, you can upload, each person can upload their information and it remains confidential for each other. And FinCEN has essentially said that everybody's got to comply. We realize that it's new law. We realize that everyone's learning. We hope very much that you can get all the information that you can, but nobody's getting a pass. That's what they have said. You can look it up on their website. I really think, though, that, I think that if there's one party that's trying to comply and do everything correctly, that it wouldn't really, ding you, although technically they could.
So the LLC 2, which is a member of LLC 1, I know within that LLC, I'm not a member, but there are about, I don't remember exactly the number there. There's probably about 10 members. So,
So let's
so you're
assume
saying
that
I need to get 10 different people to give me their info so that I can completely file the proper report for LLC 1?
well, LLC 1 will need to report you, your spouse, and then LLC 2, let's say that all the owners, there's 10 owners and they all own 10%. Well, none of them are going to report. You would just report whoever manages that, whoever's the decision maker. So you might only have to report one. It depends on how much they own, right?
Okay.
It's only 25%, so it might not be as bad as you think. Because a lot, especially in real estate, like I just talked to someone yesterday and like it's a bunch of doctors, they own a medical building and there's like 100 of them and they all own, like 1%. Well, none of those people are, yeah, they own 1%. They don't have to report, but their board of directors is going to have to report, but there's nobody that has 25% ownership interest. And then
So there's, yeah.
C2 would
So-
have to also report because they would have to file its own separate report as well.
So that, yeah, there's one person that's kind of the manager for that LLC that I, communicate with, regularly as far as tax returns go and that sort of stuff. So, and reporting and so
Mhm.
forth. So that particular person, that
For sure.
would have to, be included. And sounded like if they have a FinCEN, that person would want to give me a FinCEN ID. And if I have the FinCEN ID, then that will cover, because that will be.
That would provide the information
Yeah.
and keep it confidential from you.
If he doesn't want to give me his driver, whatever is
Uh-huh.
necessary, I just need a FinCEN ID to be able to put that in there. And then that will give them the information they need once they look up his ID, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Because it's all the same information. Like I went in and put on mine, I went in and put, here's my passport, date of birth, residential address, and all of that good stuff. So that's, that's another way to do it. And you get your FinCEN ID at FinCEN.gov. You do the BOI reporting. There's a button where you can get the FinCEN identifier.
So my wife and I, we have a trust that was member of a number of different LLCs. So we both need to get there'll be 2 different FinCEN IDs, one for her,
Yes.
one for me.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you have a lot of LLCs, my friend, this is the greatest thing ever. Like,
Okay. All right. So that's fine. So I'll get a FinCEN ID for both of us. Will be 2 different ones. And then I'll just need to have a FinCEN ID for any
Right.
other member.
because your trust is not a reporting company, because trusts don't have to do anything with the Secretary of State or the Corporation Commission in order to be formed.
Right. And my trust is a member of all the LLCs. So,
Right. Which is a great strategy for you. Like, as far as succession planning, that's excellent.
okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Audrey.
So I have quite a few clients who have LLCs, and I'm going to reach out to them. Where would I direct them? To
Well,
go.
I mean, I think that they should talk to a qualified business attorney. I mean, you're welcome to refer them to me. You can also
Okay.
give them information to FinCEN.gov. I'm actually doing a promotion right now where, I'm giving $100 off my review packages, which also include filing the BOIR. I can send you that code. It's at the end of this presentation. I'm happy to do that if you reach out to me. I have kind of a blurb
Perfect.
that I've been sharing with folks, so just email me and I'll share it with you and you can use it with your list.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Andre. Or did I say it right?
No, you got it right. I don't know if he can come off mute.
Oh, okay. So let me read this. To confirm, I have several LLCs, all formed between 2011 and 2014. No action is required by you to be correct. Okay. So if there's never been any foreign ownership, there's been no transactions in the last 12 months for over $1,000, owns no assets, and there's been no change of ownership in the last 12 months, then yes, you are correct, Andre. You do not have to report for those 2 entities that were created 2011 and 2014.
And Lisa, for something like that, though, assets, I assume would include, let's say, there's a bank account sitting somewhere that just has $1,000 sitting in it. It's not been touched for years. That still
Yep.
would mean they have to report, right?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's like, read very carefully the slide that has that. So it's like, did it do any transactions of, $1,000 in the last 12 months? I think I would err on the side of reporting that one and then just shut down the bank account. So, but cash is an asset. Anybody else? Well, I would like to thank everyone for letting me talk to you today. I thank you for being concerned about this and spreading the word. Lisa Larkin, as always, my friend. Remax, the Valley team, thank you guys so much. for giving me this platform. I really, really appreciate you and all the things that you do to educate the community. So, I'm wishing it was Friday. For some reason, I feel like I've done a presentation. It should be Friday. I should be off. Anyway, all right. I will see y'all later. If you need anything from me, please contact me by email.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so
My
much. We appreciate it.
pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.